Yo, SWAC talk. Light on the mic, it's a play. Seawell's the guy taking us state to state. Catch us Wednesday, Sunday, stats on the buffet. From Grand Darren to the court, we got the say. Football spirals, hoop dreams in the chat. Chopping it up, deep dives on every stat. Texas to Florida, repping border to border. Arkansas to Bama, the vibe getting warmer. SWAC talk, keep the knowledge on deck. Seawell spinning, wisdom gotta show respect. Facts flying higher than a wide receiver's check. From football to hoops, what y'all expect? Guests roll through, dropping stories untold. Legends from the SWAC, spitting straight gold. Locker room vibe, secrets unfold. CW heavy like a championship hold. The South's got a rhythm, a culture to match. Each stat, each fact, another door latch. SWAC talk connects like a perfect pass catch. From Alabama skies to Florida's grass patch. SWAC talk, keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday, where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive. Keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive.
All right, everybody, what is going on? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. I am your tour guide around the SWAC, Seawell's coming at you, and we are going to start a new show today. We're going to do this mainly throughout the football season, but I wanted to kick it off now just to kind of give it a intro, a little rollout. And this show is called For Entertainment Purposes Only. And this is going to basically be a little weekly guide to point spreads and over under totals and things like that. So again, this is for entertainment purposes only. I ain't telling you to put no money on nothing. I ain't claiming to be an expert on nothing, but I do like to have fun with this. So we're gonna do a weekly point spread show, and then we'll tabulate records every week to see how these teams do as favorites, as underdogs, how they do straight up, how they do over unders throughout the season, just to kind of get some trends and have a little bit extra fun on top of everything else that's going on through the season. So I wanted to introduce this series today with doing some early win totals for the 2025 season. Obviously, this is not exact. This is honestly not a prediction. There's so much that can change between now and the start of the season that some of these teams may not be where they are right now, and we really don't know where a lot of these teams are right now. So a lot of this is just speculation and guessing, and just kind of putting a little something on paper to start. I may update this once we get maybe like a week before the season. I'll probably update this show, do another version of it, and maybe revise some things based on what we know as we get closer to the season. But for now, this is where we stand. So with that being said, man, y'all hit those socials: Facebook is SWAC Talk, Instagram SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76. Also, don't forget to like the video, comment, and share your thoughts on this and any other suggestions you want to see on this show itself for entertainment purposes only. Also, I do want to put out this show is being brought to you by Wells Painting and Drywall. Over 50 years of experience, interior, exterior painting, sheetrock hanging, sheetrock finishing. Right now, running a pressure washing special. For $475, you can get your front porch, back porch, any walkways, other concrete, and driveway washed for $475, man, within the Baton Rouge limits. I probably can expand out an hour each way for a free estimate. You can contact Charles Wells at 727-325-7631 or 603-4261, area code 225 and we can help you with that. So with that being said, man, let's go ahead and get into this show and make this happen. So as usual, we start off with the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M. Um, they are a team with a new coach. They're another one. They're the first of the team. They're the first of the new coach team on this list, and we're going to start off with them. Coach Shade inherits a team that was a mediocre team record wise the last few years. So they added a new quarterback in Makai Hagens a couple this last week or so. Um, they returned some solid receivers. Running game, isn't really um, loaded with experience, but they have a really good offensive line. Defense is kind of a mixed bag, but um, this is one of those teams that we don't really know where they're heading right now. So to kind of look at this team, this is one of those who knows kind of situations. But they opened up their season at Arkansas against the Razorbacks. Um, I'm putting that down as an L. And just to let you know, a lot of these totals will be in the halves. So I use I look at games as being favorites to win, favorites to lose, and then toss ups. So I give a team that's a favorite to win. That team gets the team gets 1 point, and if it's a toss up, they get a half a point. So a half a point, half a win, how we're gonna put it, that gets you to that half mark. And obviously, if you were to do anything with this for entertainment purposes, you would say this team is going to finish over the win total that I have or under the win total that I have. And if they, let's say, 5.5 is the win total, then for you to win over, they would have to have 6 wins. Anything below 6 wins, you lose. So with that out the way, like I said, we have the Bulldogs taking on the Razorbacks. I have that game as a loss. They come home to open up their home slate against Alcorn in the Lewis Cruz Classic on September the 6th. I have that game marked as a toss-up. Right now, it's really because both teams have some questions. We don't really know what Alabama A&M is, and Alcorn, they do have a great running back coming back, but the quarterback situation is kind of topsy-turvy. They lose some key guys on defense. So this is, this game could go either way at this point. Obviously, as we get closer, we'll know a whole lot more. But at this point, I had that game as a toss-up. Um, the following game is on September 13th at Tennessee State. I have that game down as a loss. Tennessee State is coming off of a playoff appearance. They added Kendrick Grimes to their team, which I think is a big deal for their offense. Of course, they have some guys to replace, but and they have some leadership change as well. So I still, with this being a road game, I think the Tigers may be slightly favored to win this game. I don't think it's a dominant favorite, but I think it's a little bit more than a toss up. So I'll go with Tennessee State there. On September 20th, the Bulldogs come home to take on Lane. I have that as a win. That's a D2 opponent. They should take care of business there and probably have a good game scoring wise in that one. They follow that up with a trip to Bethune-Cookman on September 27th. The Wildcats, even though they return their coach and they have a couple guys coming back, they did lose a lot off of their team. They lost Dennis Palmer, who was their top running back. They lose Thomas Nance, one of their top wide receivers. They lose some guys on the defense. They lose their whole kicking unit. So I think this is a team that's in constant rebuild. So I do have the Bulldogs on the hook for a win there. They followed it up with a trip to Mobile to take on Jackson State on October 4th. JSU defending champs should come into the season as the pick to win the East and the overall conference and go back to Celebration Bowl. I think JSU wins that game. October 11th, Bulldogs come back home to take on Valley. Valley, again, new coach. We have no idea what this team has. We have no idea where this team is going. So that's a W for the Bulldogs. They followed it up with their bye week. And coming off of that bye week on October 25th, they go to Birmingham to take on Alabama State. The Hornets have won, I think they won like the last 3 games in the series. I don't see it right now. I don't see any reason why that would change. I think Bama State, even with the loss of a defensive coordinator and a lot of guys on their defense, I think that philosophy and belief in defense is still going to be there, and the offense should be better this season. So I do have them beating the Bulldogs there. They followed that up with a trip to Grambling. Um, this, if you look at my series history video I dropped like a week or so ago, you know this A&M's kind of had Gramblin's number. Even though they haven't won a lot of games in the series, they've won a lot of games recently. Um, and the last time they went to Grambling, they won. Grambling is a team I don't know where they're gonna be. They lost a lot of guys as well. Uh, they did add some good pieces, but we don't really know. I have this game as a toss up. This is one of those games that can go either way at this point. Um, Although if I was wagering today, I would give Grambling a slight edge for playing at home. But right now, I think this is a toss up game. They followed it up on November 8th with a game against Prairie View at home, and again, Prairie View is a very intriguing team, and you're gonna hear this a lot when I speak on them on this show. They're a very intriguing team. They have they added a really good coach, have a coaching staff that is experienced, and all the guys have been winners. They've added a lot of transfers. Um, so they're looking to hop on that win train now. It's just so early to forecast teams like that, and that's why I mark this game as a toss up. Not necessarily because I think that on November 8th that A&M and Prairie View are going to be even. I don't think it's that. I think at this point we just have no clue. So I'm marking the game as a toss up. They followed that up on November 15th with a game against FAMU at home. They haven't beaten the Rattlers since they've been in the SWAC. Again, I think FAMU, even though they're not figured to be where they are, they've been in recent years, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as some people think they will be. But I think they beat the Bulldogs here, and then they close out their season on November 22nd at Texas Southern. Again, this is a game TSU finished the season kind of strong. I think they're going to be a team that's going to be a tough out this season. I don't know if they're, I don't know if I would, consider them to be a team to kind of figure into the divisional race, but I do think they're going to be a team that if you don't show up, you're going to get beat. But I still again I have some faith in A&M, but I'm not sure right now. So I mark that game as a toss up as well. So that gives the Bulldogs 5 wins for my projection for this season. So 5-7 would be what where that is for them. And that's not good, it's not bad, but with a new coach and a lot of turnover, I think that's fair. We follow that up with the Hornets of Alabama State. Uh, I think this team is gonna be right there in the mix. If there's any team in the conference that can give JSU a run on any given Saturday, it could be the Hornets. I'm not saying it will, but I'm saying the way that the team is built and the philosophy and just the attitude, I think they can carry themselves in that game. But they are going to be a better team, I think, than they were last season, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Defense, there are a lot of questions, and that's probably the one thing that's keeping me from just putting them completely, really in the mix for division. I think they're just, I think it's going to be a up and down spot for them till they can get those guys acclimated and, just really get their buy-in and production. But they open up their season on Thursday, August 28th at UAB. I have their game down as a loss. They go to Baton Rouge on September 6th to take on Southern. I have this game as a toss-up. I would favor Bama State if the game was this Saturday, primarily just because at this point, um, Southern still has a few offensive questions. Running the running game is going to be a question at least for a few weeks. Quarterback play obviously is going to be something that you got to keep your eyes on. There are capable guys, but who's going to take the reins and who's going to lead this offense. Of course, by this point in the season, this would be Southern's third game, so you'll have a better idea what this team is once they roll into this game. But I do have this game as a toss-up. Uh, the Hornets follow that game up with a matchup against Miles. Um, they Miles has given them trouble the last few years, but they beat them this past season. They lost them the year before. Had a couple close games before that, but I think they win this game here and get their bye week on September 20th. They follow that up with a game on September 27th at Florida A&M. I have this game marked as a toss-up. Last season, this game was I think it was a 15-point game, but Bama State was in the game for a while. I think, FAMU, this is going to be a early conference test for them. And honestly, an early actual conference test for both teams because the Southern game is a non-conference game. But this is an actual conference test. And it's on the road, so that makes it a little bit more dicey. And that's why I have this game more of a toss-up than having it as a Bama State win. They followed that up with a game against Bethune-Cookman on October the 4th. I have that down as a W. I think these two teams are kind of trending in different directions. But I think the Hornets get the win there. October 11th, they go to Jackson to take on Jackson State. Not quite ready to mark that game as a toss-up, so I have JSU as the favorite to win that game, giving Bama State a loss. They have their bye week followed up by the Magic City Classic against Alabama A&M. Of course, I have the Hornets extending their streak. I think they're a little bit more stable than the Bulldogs at this point. November 1st is another interesting game at Prairie View. Hornets snapped a losing streak against the Panthers last season in an ugly game, 9-6. I have this game as a toss-up as well because, again, I think Prairie View is going to be a really solid team. I'm not quite sure exactly what they're going to be, but I think they're going to be a very competitive team, and they could be in a battle for the division if things fall their way at this point. And that makes it an interesting game. And again, because this game is on the road, I give the home team a little bit more of an edge, and that makes this game a toss-up. They follow that up with a game at home against Texas Southern on November 8th. Should be a very physical game, but I do like the Hornets in it right now. And then follow that up with a November 15th game in Mobile against Valley. I have that as a W for the Hornets. Valley, total question mark at this point. Follow that up with a game on November 22nd at home against UAPB. Pine Bluff's another one of those teams who, I think they're deep in a rebuild. They can't keep guys, from leaving in the portal, and they're constantly adding guys, and we just don't never really know where they're at. I think they take a step back from where they were last season, even though they didn't take a huge step forward. They did offensively to a degree, but not as a team. I still think they take a step backwards. That gives Hornets another win, and they close that out with the Turkey Day Classic on Thanksgiving against Tuskegee. That's November 27th, and I have that as a Hornets victory. Of course, we know historically Tuskegee has given them some tough times, but recently the Hornets have been much better in this series, and so that gives Bama State a total of 8.5 wins, and that's a high number. But I think I think the majority of their games, other than probably Jackson State and UAB, they'll be either a slight underdog or a favorite in. So I think they have a good chance. Now, whether they do it or not, that's a different story. But I think right now on paper, I think they benefit from a easier close to their schedule. I have them with 4 straight wins to close out the schedule. So I think they have an opportunity to knock off a lot of teams, and if they can pull an upset in Jackson, then that will put them in a great spot for a division championship. But right now, I have JSU as a solid favorite in that game, so I don't really see that happening. But I think they're going to be competitive, and all of this, of course, hinges on how their defense plays, because I think the offense is going to be better this season, but I think the defense is going to have to take a couple steps forward to kind of get back to where they were. Next up is Alcorn. The Braves, they had a pretty decent season. Finished just short of the SWAC West Championship. Was a very strong rushing team last season. Passing game wasn't always there. Defensively, they were, a solid defense, not quite that Alcorn defense, but they were pretty solid at times. There are some questions for this team, especially again in the passing game. And I think the offensive line is kind of kind of steady, but still some questions. Then of course on defense, you're losing some big time guys on all levels. So I think there are some questions for this team, and they open up their schedule on the road for 3 straight weeks. And to me, that's definitely tough. Um, it's not make or break tough because none of those games are official conference games. So that at least regardless of what happens, you won't lose any ground in the conference. But they open up on Thursday, August 28th at Northwestern State. The Demons are a program I really think a lot of teams in our conference should beat. Now, whether they do or not, that's a different story. I think I think Alcorn being on the road to open up the season, with again, either you having a brand new quarterback or a guy who didn't play a whole lot in recent years at that spot, along with some receivers being added and the offensive line and things. Early in the season, on the road on a Thursday, I had this game as a toss up. Um, Again, kind of get an edge to the team playing at home. But I do think if Alcorn can come out sharp, I think they can win this game. But right now, I have it as a toss up. They followed it up on September 6th at Alabama A&M. Again, as I said, this is a toss up game. Both teams have a lot of questions early, and we don't fully know where these guys are. So I had that game as a toss up. Follow that up with a trip to Starkville to take on the Bulldogs of Mississippi State. Have that as a loss. September 20th, they have a bye week. September 27th, they go to the Southern Heritage Classic in Memphis to take on UAPB. I have them. I have Alcorn favored in this game against the Golden Lions, so I had them down for a win in that game. They follow that up with a game against Prairie View on October 4th. They get Prairie View at home. You can rinse and repeat on Prairie View, but I think though, I think this game should be a toss-up. It's been a close matchup the last few years. Um, I give Alcorn a slight edge for playing at home, and a slight edge for having some more continuity and less unknowns than the Panthers. But I think I'm giving Prairie View a huge benefit of the doubt based on what they've done in the offseason, and kind of like the I don't say hype, but kind of the aura that they're coming into the season with. I had that down as a toss up. Followed it up on October 11th with a game against Lincoln. That's a win for Alcorn. October 18th, they play FAMU for the first time since 1982. First time since these two teams have been in the conference together. I have that as a loss. Not a huge favorite for FAMU, but I do have them as enough of a favorite that is not a toss up. They followed that up with a home game against Valley on October 25th. I have that down as a Braves W. After that is November 1st at Texas Southern. This is a matchup that's been real dicey for Alcorn in previous years. Before last season, TSU had beat them the last two times. And so I think this should be a very intriguing matchup. Again, I don't know, where these teams are going to be in terms of, in the division, but it could be a game where either team can springboard this to a late push to the division. And so, I have that as a toss up primarily because Alcorn is on the road. If this game was in Lorman, I probably would have Alcorn as the favorite, but I have it as more of a toss up. They follow that up with a home game against Southern. Excuse me, a home game against Southern on November 8th. I have this as a toss up. Southern doesn't really play well at Alcorn. The last time they went there, they got blowed out. Before that, the last time they won at Alcorn was like 2016. Before that, it had been, even longer. So this is one of those places and one of those teams against Southern all kind of fits. And, Southern, should come into the season as a division, as the leader in the division. But by this point in the season, you never know, with these kind of teams and these kind of matchups. So I mark this game as a toss-up. Follow it up on November 15th at home against Grambling. Again, same thing. This has been a matchup that's been a little tough for the Braves. Grambling has found a way to have a number in previous years. Both teams have some questions. Who knows where either team is at this portion of the season? I had it as a toss up, and then they closed out their season at Jackson State on November 22nd. Um, I had it as a Jackson State victory. Of course, it's a rivalry game, so Alcorn has pulled off that upset when in times where they weren't the favorite, and other times they won this game when they were. But you never count out anybody in this kind of game. But I think the spread would be big enough that Jackson State would be the outright favorite in this game. So I have them for a loss there, and that gives Alcorn a total of 6 wins, 6-6. Should be a solid schedule. They could honestly be 3-1 in the non-conference because Alabama A&M and Northwestern State aren't games that are impossible to win. Of course, you got Lincoln. That's a dub. If that's not a dub, then your whole season is in the tank. And then you have a couple games in conference that you'll be heavy favorites in, and then you have 4 toss-up games. So there's a lot of maneuverability for the team. Of course, we'll see how everything plays out, but they're in a solid spot right now with 6 wins to come into the season. We followed it up with Bethune-Cookman. This team is one of those teams that's just been brutalized in the portal. Guys have really kind of got up out of there in recent weeks, and it's always a constant state of flux. I thought this team finished the season not record wise, but I thought performance wise, I thought they finished the season strong. They had a lot of games that they were in. Of course, lost on the road in 5 overtime. The Southern should have probably won that game. Gave FAMU a huge battle. Probably should have found a way to pull that game out. Had a close loss at Texas Southern. Again, should have won that game. That's 3 extra wins. That gives you like 5 wins at minimum. So they were neck and neck with Jackson State at the halftime of their game before they gave up 20 unanswered points in the second half. So they were a competitive team, and I think they still will be that. But I just constantly starting over or not being able to take steps forward, it catches up with you. And of course, they play 2 FBS games to open up the schedule, so those games are going to immediately put you behind the 8 ball. They open up at FIU and Coach Willie Simmons on Friday, August 29th. I think FIU gets the win there. They come back to Miami on September 6th to take on the Hurricanes. That's a win for the U. September 13th, they go to South Carolina State to take on the Bulldogs. I have this down as a loss for Bethune-Cookman. I think South Carolina State is going to be one of those teams that's going to be a top contender and could be the favorite coming into the season. Of course, they have lost some key guys, but I think they have enough to win that game at home. They follow that up with a game against Edward Waters on September 20th. I have this as a win, but they lost to Clark Atlanta last season at home, so you never know. But I do have this as a win for them. They followed it up with a home game against Alabama A&M. I think the Bulldogs are probably going to be favorite in this game, so I had that as a loss. Followed it up with a game at Alabama State on October 4th. Again, that's another game that they're going to be underdogs in, so I had Alabama State winning that game. October 11th, they get Southern at home. Could be an interesting matchup, but I have Southern as a favorite in that one. So they give them another loss. They followed it up with 2 games that I can see them winning, but I don't see them being the favorite in either one of them. So I have them as toss-ups both, and that's at home against UAPB on October 25th. They have a bye week on the 18th of October, so October 25th and November 1st at home in both games against Pine Bluff and Valley. Both of those games should be toss-ups. They could, I think they'll be, slightly favored, but not enough to make this a comfortable win for either game at this point. And then they close out their schedule at Grambling on November 8th, at Jackson State on November 15th, and in Orlando against Florida A&M on November 22nd. I have those games marked as toss-up for Grambling and losses in the other 2 games, Jackson State and FAMU. They did beat Grambling last season, and they had a pretty close matchup with them in the year before. They lost by 2 touchdowns, but it was close on the road for the way that team was playing that year. So I don't really have a lot of high hopes for this team, but I do think because they closed out their schedule on the road with 3 straight games That's tough. You do have some manageable road games, some manageable home games there. Those two FBS games don't give you a chance to get off to a good start. And South Carolina State's a tough opponent. And your team who lost your D2 game last year, so there isn't a lot of optimism. But I have the team down for 2.5 wins. I can see them exceeding that, because obviously the Valley and Pine Bluff games could be wins, honestly, and that gives you 3 as long as you beat Edward Water. So it's not impossible to go over that 2.5. I don't feel totally confident in picking them to go over that, but out of those 3 teams that are kind of the bottom of the SWAC, I think they may be a bit more ahead of those other 2 teams. So I can, like I said, I can see them being favored in both of those games, but maybe not enough to push it out of a toss-up situation. Um, we followed it up with the Rattlers of Florida A&M coming off of a disappointing season for them. I do think I do think they're gonna take a step forward. I don't know, they'll probably, still be in that battle for, second in the division. I don't really know if they're gonna be able to get to the division, but I think they're gonna be in a more of a battle with Bama State. This team obviously has some things to prove, and they have a really good running game. They still have some great receivers. The offensive line is still steady. Quarterback is going to be, the question mark. Defensively, can they get back to being what they were? They showed flashes late in the season, but early in the season they really struggled to stop the run. And so we'll see, see if they can, improve those things. And they get a tough game to open up the season in Miami in the Orange Blossom Classic against Howard on August 30th. Um, just because that's an early season game, and Howard, they've been a competitive team in recent years. I don't really know exactly what the Bison are right now, but I had this game as a toss-up because it's early. Uh, but I can see FAMU winning that game if some things can fall their way early. They followed that up with a game against Florida Atlantic on September 6th. I have that down as a loss, as an FBS game, marked that as a loss. September 13th, they're at home against Albany State. That's a win. They get an early bye week on the 20th of September, followed by a game at home against Bama State. I have this game as a toss-up, but I give the Rattlers a slight edge for playing at home. This should be a game that's going to really impact the division. I think, whoever wins this game is going to be in decent shape to compete for the division. Now, whether they get over the hump, one of them, to get over the hump, you're going to have to beat Jackson State. And I don't really have either one of those teams doing that, but they do put themselves in a decent position, whoever wins that game. They followed it up with a game that I don't really think is going to be a game to totally worry about, but for memes and messery, October 4th at Valley, a lot of people are gonna pick Valley to win this game because of what happened last year. But I don't even know how many guys Valley is gonna have, let alone what kind of team they're gonna have. They lost a lot of their playmakers from last season, and we have no clue what they have this season. So I do have FAMU winning that game. They come back on October 11th against North Carolina Central. Should be a very interesting game. Central, regardless, I think they're going to always be in the mix in the MEAC, and I don't see this as being any different. They return a lot of guys from their team, and they're still a solid team with a great coaching staff. So I do have this game as a toss-up, leaning more towards Central, but I have it as a toss-up again, primarily because FAMU playing at home. They followed it up with a game against Alcorn on October 18th. I have that down as a win for the Rattlers, although, I think Alcorn can be competitive in the game, but I do have FAMU winning that game at home. Followed it up with a game at Southern on October 25th. This was a game that was a nip and tuck game for a while, but Southern never really had a chance to win it. I don't look at it as Southern was right there to win, but I thought they were right there in the game, but not enough to be competitive in terms of winning the game. FAMU has given Southern problems for a long time, and I don't 100%. I think this game is going to be another one of those type of games where it may come down to some late scores, but I can't give either team a full edge right now, so I mark it as a toss-up. They followed it up with a home game against Jackson State. I have Jackson State winning that game. And then they close out their season with some winnable games. They got to go to Pine Bluff on November 8th. They get Alabama A&M on the road on November 15th, and then they close out with the Florida Classic on November 22nd against Bethune-Cookman. So I do have this team winning all three of those games. Of course, you can never count out a rivalry matchup, and of course, playing on the road later in the season, a lot of that is can determine a lot of that can determine kind of your team's fortunes, especially, depending on how you're coming into those games. If you're struggling and you come into those games, those could be the kind of games you drop late. If you're coming in on a roll, those could be the kind of games that you kind of, get through and get the win in. So I do have them as the favorites in these games right now. And that gives FAMU a marker 8 wins. I know a lot of people gonna say, Rattlers gonna be like 6-6 and 5-7. And I don't really think the team is gonna be, I don't think they're gonna underachieve like they did last season. I don't know how good they're gonna be, but I think everybody on that team and staff knows that they can't have what happened last season happen this season. And they do have a manageable schedule. Now they do have a lot of toss-up games that can go either way. But I think if they can pull off a couple of those, I think they'll be in good shape. But they do have, a tough road ahead of them in terms of the conference and the division. Next up is the Grambling Tigers. Again, this is another team who I have a lot of questions for, but I think with the West being the way it is, they have opportunity in a ton of these games if they can put some things together. Of course, losing Andrew Jones on your defense is like really a huge loss. The guy did everything, over 120 tackles, was all over the field, made tackles in the backfield. You lose some guys at the secondary, lose some guys on defensive line. Of course, you lose both your running backs. You lose your top receiver, you lose your quarterback. But you bring in some guys who can get the job done if given the chance and the opportunity. But this schedule kind of can play their way. Of course, it's some up and down games, but we'll run through them. August 30th, they get Langston and Shreveport. I have that as a win. September 6th, they go to the Horseshoe to take on Ohio State. That's a loss. They come home on September 13th to take on Kentucky State. I have that as a win. They get East Texas A&M at home. They did beat this team in overtime last season. I think they win this game again. A game like this, I really want the SWAC to win these kind of games, and I have Grambling winning this game. They go to Dallas to take on Prairie View in the State Fair Classic on September 27th. I had this game as a toss-up, although I do think Prairie View will probably be the favorite coming into this game, depending on how the Panthers are doing, obviously. But I had this game as a toss-up. Bye week, October 1st. They followed it up with a game on October 11th at home against Texas Southern. Tigers beat them last season, but I have this as a toss-up again. These games have been close in recent years, but I have this as a toss-up for Grambling. Maybe a slight favorite playing at home, but I think this is going to be a toss-up type of game. They followed it up on the following week, which is October 18th at UAPB. I have Grambling as a favorite in that game. October 25th, they go to Las Vegas to take on Jackson State. They beat JSU last year, but it took a ton of turnovers. I don't think that's going to happen again this year, so I have Jackson State winning that game. November 1st, they get Alabama A&M at home. I had that as a toss-up primarily because, both of these teams have kind of traded wins at home. In recent years, Grambling, has they've won a few of these games when, they probably shouldn't have. And A&M, really pulled off a couple wins that they probably shouldn't have in certain times. Especially last season, I thought Grambling had the game locked up, but A&M was able to pull it out. They followed that up with a game against Bethune-Cookman at home. I had a game as a toss-up primarily because Bethune-Cookman has played them close in recent years, but I do have Grambling probably as a slight favorite. Alcorn is another toss-up game on the road on November 15th. We followed it up with a bye week on the 22nd. And then you had a Bayou Classic against Southern. Of course, everybody gonna say it's because I'm from Southern. I have Grambling winning, but if I felt like Grambling was the favorite, I have Grambling winning this game. It's not a huge. I don't think Southern's a huge favorite. I think they're just enough of a favorite to not make it a toss-up. But if you want to call it a toss-up because it's a rivalry game, you can do that too. But I think it's gonna be. I think Southern gonna be a decent enough favorite. coming into that game. And that gives Grambling 6.5 wins. If you do take that Southern game, make it a toss-up, then you get Grambling to 7 wins. But I'm not quite sure this team gets to 7 wins, at least sitting here right now. Of course, by the time the season gets started, anything could happen. And this team could be one of those teams who, takes the reins in the division and runs with them. But right now, I think it's a little early for that. And that's why I had them at 6.5 wins. Um, Probably the easiest one of these to do is Jackson State. This team would be favored in, I think, 11 of their what they play, 11 games, 12 games, whatever. This team will be the favorite in every game they play, probably except for one. And I really wanna lean to them on that one, but strange things always happen in games against those kind of teams. So I'm not really gonna. I'm gonna kind of defer to that FBS team, but um, yeah, this team would be favored in 10 out of 11 games. So they open up their season at home against Hampton. I have them winning that game. Uh, they go to Southern Miss on September 6th. I think a lot of people, this is going to be the FBS game that a lot of people kind of favorite them, at least give them a good opportunity. I think, some things are going to have to fall their way that are out of their control to win. I do think if they have any chance of this game, I would expect some odd stuff to happen. But that's the only reason why I'm leaning Southern Miss in this game right now. Um, it's early, and who knows how things go early, but I'm going with Southern Miss early. They come home on September 13th against Tuskegee. I have them winning that game. They're off on September 20th, September 27th. They play Southern. They've beaten Southern 6 straight times. I think they're favored in this game, so they win that. Go to Mobile to take on Alabama A&M on the 4th of October. That's a win for them. Bama State's going to be a game that can be tough, but not enough for me to mark it as a toss-up. I do have Jackson State favored in that game. Bye week on the 18th. They go to Vegas on the 25th to take on Grambling. I have them beating Grambling in that game. They go to Bragg on November 1st. I have them winning that game, but it's going to be an interesting game. Could be a close game, and it's also kind of to keep a tab on playing this game on the road after coming from Vegas. How the team's going to be. Could be a chance for family to catch them, but right now I think JSU's the favorite in that game. November 8th, you go to Valley. I have that as a win. November 15th, you get Bethune-Cookman at home. I have that as a win. And then you close out on the 22nd of November against Alcorn again. Alcorn is going to be a game that, the Braves can, throw a monkey wrench in there. But right now, I think Jackson State's favorite in that game. And like I said, this was an easy one. I had them with 10 wins. And so I think they're going to, obviously win the division and the conference and, take care of business there. So that one was pretty easy. And this one also, I would say, is pretty easy, but in the opposite direction. Because this team, out of everybody, this team is a total unknown. We don't really have a good track record of the coach. We don't really have a good track record of anybody coming in. They lost the guys who produced for them on both sides of the ball, and they weren't good last year anyway. So, and I'm not saying that to hate, but they weren't. I mean, let's just be honest. Coach Buckley could, Coach Buckley could work a miracle, and they do have some games that I think, especially playing at home. Some of these games they may be able to manage. I don't think they're like super underdogs in a lot of these games, but it's going to be tough, especially early. And so they open up on August 30th at home against Southern. I do have Southern winning that game primarily just because we have no clue what Valley going to be like in that first week. Who knows, man? Maybe they can ambush Southern. You know what I'm saying? We have no clue, but I do have them dropping that game. They have back-to-back FCS road games at Tarleton State and at Southeastern Louisiana on September 6th and September 13th. I had them losing both of those games. They get a bye week. Then they come home to play Texas Southern. I have TSU winning that game. You never know, but I do have TSU as the favorite in that game. They get a bye week excuse me, they get FAMU on October 4th again. I know a lot of people are gonna have fun with that game and say Valley gonna win, but I still go with FAMU in that one. No, October 11th they get Alabama A&M on the road. I have Bulldogs winning that game. Um, they come home to play Lincoln um, on October 18th. That's the only game I had this team as a full fledged favorite in, and of course, who even knows? If they don't win this game, it's going to be a very very long season. I'm still favoring them over Lincoln because it's Lincoln. Um, so I do have Valley as the favorite in that game. October 25th they go to Alcorn. I have the Braves as the favorite in that game. I have that's a Valley loss. November 1st they go to Bethune-Cookman. I have that as a toss up. Um, these teams traded wins in recent years. I think Bethune's a bit ahead of them, but who knows where these two teams are at this point in the season. So I have Bethune-Cookman as a toss up there. They close out their schedule at home against Jackson State. I have that as a loss. Um, at home against Jackson State. At in Mobile against Bama State on November 15th and November 22nd at Prairie View. All three of those games I had them as losses. So I have Valley down for 1.5 wins. Um, they have one actual toss up. A couple of those other games could be toss up depending on how those teams are playing. But right now, I have Valley as a solid underdog against pretty much everybody they play. The only game I can really say I think that they win for sure is Lincoln. If they lose that game, you can really throw away everything for the season and get ready for next year. Um, wishing the best for the Delta Devils, but right now it's going to be tough. We followed it up with Prairie View. Again, this is probably the most intriguing team on this list. I think this team can go anywhere at this point. They can win 8 games. They could win 3 games. We don't have any clue. I think I don't really think they're gonna lose that many games because I think Coach Jackson's gonna do a great job there. But right now, um, being objective, I can't really put them anywhere really, but I do think they have a great opportunity because I do think the schedule bodes well for them. They open up at Texas Southern. That game I definitely have as a toss up, primarily because I almost want to lean TSU as a favorite, but I do think this is a toss up because A, it's a rivalry game, and B, I think Prairie View gonna be hungry to bounce back from last season. So I think that's gonna be a toss up. Next they play UT Rio Grande Valley. Um, I have Prairie View winning this game. Of course, like I said, I'm leaning more toward wins in the non-conference for the SWAC. That's what I want, so I'm putting it there. Um, that is their home opener on September 6th. They followed that up with a trip to Houston to take on Rice on September 13th. I have Rice winning that game. Although Rice has not been great historically, they've been decent in recent years, but I have them dropping that Rice game. And then they followed that up with a game against Northwestern State. They beat the Demons last season, so I kind of expect that to happen again. Northwestern State's been a team that's perennially been down in recent years, so I think they're gonna continue to trend that way. And I think the Panthers win. They followed that up with a game in Dallas against Grambling. I think this game being a toss-up has been relatively close in recent years, so I think it's going to continue that way. They go to Alcorn and Southern in back-to-back weeks. That's October 11th and that's October 4th. Then they get a bye week, and then they go to Southern on the 18th. I have both those games as toss-ups, um, primarily just because I don't really know what this team is. But I do think they have an ability to win these games if they're playing great ball. So both those games are toss-ups. They get Lincoln on October 25th. I have that as a win. They followed it up with a home game against Bama State on November 1st. I had that as a toss-up. November 8th, they go to Alabama A&M. I have them. I have that game as a toss-up as well. Then they close their season with 2 games. I have them winning. Um, at Valley, excuse me, Pine Bluff at home and Valley at home. So I have them winning both of those games. That's on November 15th and November 22nd, respectively. And that gives Prairie View 6.5 wins. I think that's a solid mark. And I don't really think they're going to be heavy underdogs in a lot of conference games. Your non-conference opponents are Bama State, um, Valley, and Alabama A&M. So you avoid Jackson State. Um, you avoid having to take a return trip to Tallahassee. So I think that gives you an opportunity to stack up some wins, and the rest of your conference games are toss-ups that you have a chance to win, I believe. So I do think 6.5 wins is solid. I know that that's not what a lot of people want to hear, because everybody wants to hear that Prairie View going to run the show. I can't say that right now. Um, so I'm not going to go there, but I think that they will be a very formidable opponent as the season moves on. It takes us to Southern. Um, Southern has and doesn't have as many questions as people think they do. I think Southern is a bit better than some people think. I think Southern may not be as good as some people think, but I think they will be the team to beat coming into the season. They have a huge game on August 23rd in the MEAC Challenge against North Carolina Central. I had this game as a toss-up, but I lean more towards Central. I think Central is going to be a very strong team. We're going to know a lot about Southern coming out of this game, regardless of win or loss, how they play in this game. I think it's going to go a long way in showing what this team is. They followed it up with a game on August 30th against Valley. I had them as a win there. September 6th, they get Bama State at home. I had it as a toss-up, leaning more toward the Hornets, but I do have it as a toss-up. September 13th, they go to Fresno to take on Fresno State. I had that down as a loss. September 20th, they're off. September 27th, they come home for Jackson State. I have JSU winning that game. They get another bye week on October 4th. October 11th, they go to Daytona to take on Bethune-Cookman. I have them winning that game. They get Prairie View on October 18th. I have that as a toss-up. FAMU, same thing, that's a toss-up. But again, I lean more toward the Rattlers, at least at this point. Because like I said, historically, I can't really pick Southern to beat FAMU till they start doing it. So same thing with Jackson State. I can't pick them to beat them until, of course, they did it before, but it's been six straight games that they haven't did it. So until they can show it to me, I'm not going there. And the same thing with the Rattlers. No, November 1st, they're at Pine Bluff. I have that as a win. November 8th, they're at Alcorn. Again, I had that as a toss-up because Southern historically has had a lot of problems at Alcorn, and I don't think that's going to change. And then November 15th, they get Texas Southern at home. I had them winning that game. And Grambling, I had them winning that game on November 29th in New Orleans. So pretty cut and dry for Southern. I have Southern at 8 wins. Last season they won 8 games. I think they can do it again. They do have some toss-ups that are very crucial. That Central game is going to be crucial. Of course, Bama State, FAMU, Alcorn, all those games are huge toss-ups. You can flip Grambling to a toss-up if you want to. You can even flip TSU to a toss-up if you want to. Um, I think those games are going to be very interesting. But um, I do lean that way. Next up is Texas Southern. The Tigers had a really strong finish, finished third in the division. I think they're going to continue to build on that. They should be a team that can catch some people off guard if they're not careful. They open up at home against Prairie View again. I had that game as a toss-up. I think this is anybody's game. On August 30th, September 6th, they go to Cal to take on the Golden Bears. I think Cal wins that game. September 13th, they play Lamar at home. They should have beat Lamar last year in Beaumont. I had them winning this game at home because I really think they should have won it last year. So I'm really hoping they win it this year. September 20th, they're off. September 27th, they're at Valley. I have that as a win for them. October 4th, they get Pine Bluff at home. I have that as a win. October 11th, they're at Grambling. I have that as a toss-up. They get Virginia Lynchburg on October 18th. I have that as a win. They get a bye week followed by a home game against Alcorn on November 1st. I have that marked as a toss-up. They close out their season with 2 out of 3 games on the road at Bama State and at Southern. I have both those games as losses. That's that's November 8th and November 11th. And then they close out their season at home on November 22nd against Alabama A&M. I had that game as a toss-up. So that puts TSU at 6 wins. I think that's a one-game improvement over last season. So it is a steady up climb. And I think they have a decent non-conference slate. They have a great non-divisional slate in terms of having to not play Jackson State off FAMU. You get Bama State, which is going to be tough. You get Alabama A&M, which could be manageable, and then you get Valley. So that is an opportunity to put together some wins there. This team can continue the trajectory that they finished the season on, and I think 6 wins is a good mark for them to build on. And we close out our show with UAPB again. Like Bethune and like Valley, I think this is a team that you're going to forecast more losses than wins. Just so much change for this team over the course of the off season that I don't really foresee them having a lot go their way. They open up the season on August 30th at Texas Tech. I had that as a loss. They go to UCA on September 6th. I had that as a loss. They get Lincoln at home on September 13th. I had that as a win. Bye week on the 20th of September. September 27th, they play Alcorn in Memphis. I have that as a loss. They go to Texas Southern the following week on October 4th. I have that down as a loss. They get Westgate Christian on October 11th. I have that as a win. They get Grambling at home on October 18th. I have what do I have on that one? I have Grambling winning that game. They get Bethune-Cookman on the road. On October 25th, I had that as a toss-up. Although I probably lean more to Bethune because it is a road game. Pine Bluff, even with the improvements they had last season, they did not win a road game last year. So I think they're going to have to prove that they can win on the road to get any of these games. But I had them dropping that game, and then they close out with a tough 4-game stretch at home against Southern, at home against FAMU on November 1st and November 8th, at Prairie View on November 15th, and at Bama State on November 22nd. I have all 4 of those games as L's. So not a lot there for this team, especially in conference. They have one toss-up on their schedule, and that's Bethune-Cookman. So, with that, it looks like I'm forecasting this team to win no conference games. I don't know. I mean, of course, I think they're going to beat somebody. It always happens. But just on paper right now, it doesn't really look good for them. They do have those 2 non-D1, non-D2 opponents. And so those are probably their best chances at wins, and I have them at 2.5 wins. So it's not a lot there. Of course, things can change, but right now I just don't feel strong about the Golden Lions. So that's going to do it for our show, man. I thank y'all for tuning in. Of course, we're going to have a show probably dropping either tomorrow or Monday talking about the SWAC baseball tournament. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. Sewell signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.